The stage lights dimmed, and for a moment, the entire auditorium fell into a silence so deep it felt almost sacred. A thin boy stepped forward, his shoes worn, his shirt slightly oversized, his hands trembling just enough to betray the storm inside him. No one in the audience knew his name yet, but within minutes, no one would ever forget it. The host smiled gently and asked him what he would be singing. The boy swallowed, his voice barely steady as he said, "Hotel California." A soft ripple of curiosity passed through the crowd. It was a bold choice. A difficult song. And as he adjusted the microphone with shaking fingers, you could feel the doubt hanging in the air. But what happened next would turn doubt into something else entirely. His name was Daniel Reyes, a 14-year-old boy who had grown up in a small, struggling neighborhood where dreams often faded before they even began. His mother worked long hours cleaning houses, and his father had left when he was too young to remember his face clearly. Music had become Daniel's only refuge. While other kids played outside, Daniel would sit near the cracked window of their tiny apartment, listening to old recordings on a secondhand radio. Among them, one song always pulled him in deeper than the rest. Hotel California. It wasn't just the melody, it was the feeling, the story within the song that made him feel understood in a way nothing else could. But life hadn't been kind to Daniel. At school, he was often mocked for his quiet nature and worn clothes. Some classmates would laugh when he mentioned his love for singing. "You, a singer," they'd say, their voices filled with disbelief. Over time, Daniel began to doubt himself. He stopped singing in front of others, keeping his voice hidden like a fragile secret. Only at night, when the world grew quiet, would he let himself sing freely, pouring out every emotion he couldn't express during the day. His mother, Maria, was the only one who truly believed in him. Despite her exhaustion, she would sit and listen when Daniel sang, her eyes filled with pride. "You have something special," she would tell him. "Don't let anyone take that away from you." But belief alone wasn't enough to silence the fear that had taken root in Daniel's heart. The turning point came when a traveling talent show announced auditions in their town. Maria encouraged Daniel to try, but he hesitated. The thought of standing in front of strangers, of being judged, of possibly failing, terrified him. For days, he wrestled with the decision. Each time he imagined stepping onto that stage, he could hear the echoes of laughter from his classmates. But then he thought of his mother, of the sacrifices she made every day, and something inside him shifted. Maybe this wasn't just about him anymore. Maybe this was his chance to give something back. On the day of the audition, Daniel almost didn't go. His hands shook so badly he could barely tie his shoes. But Maria held his face gently and said, "Courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about moving forward even when you are." Those words stayed with him as he walked into the crowded venue, his heart pounding like a drum. The audition itself was a blur. There were so many talented people, voices that seemed stronger, more confident. Daniel felt small among them. When his turn finally came, his legs felt like they might give out. But as he stepped onto the stage and closed his eyes, something unexpected happened. The noise faded, the fear softened, and for the first time, he wasn't thinking about the audience or the judges. He was thinking about the music. He didn't win that audition. In fact, he barely made it through the first round. But something had changed. For the first time, he had faced his fear and survived. And that small victory planted a seed of determination inside him. Months passed, and Daniel continued to practice. Every evening, after helping his mother with chores, he would sing. His voice grew stronger, more controlled, but more importantly, more honest. He wasn't trying to impress anyone anymore. He was telling a story, his story, through every note. Then came the biggest opportunity of his life. A nationally televised talent competition announced open auditions, and this time, Daniel didn't hesitate. He knew the risks. He knew the possibility of failure. But he also knew that if he didn't try, he would regret it forever. Which brought him to that stage, under those bright lights, facing an audience that had no idea what he had been through. The first chord played, and Daniel took a deep breath. When he began to sing, his voice was soft, almost fragile. But there was something in it, something real, something that made people lean forward in their seats. As he moved through the song, his confidence grew. His voice rose and fell with emotion, each word carrying the weight of his journey. The audience, once filled with quiet skepticism, began to change. You could see it in their faces. The curiosity turned into surprise, and then into something deeper. People were no longer just listening, they were feeling. By the time Daniel reached the chorus, his voice soared. It wasn't perfect in a technical sense, but it was perfect in a way that mattered more. It was honest. It was raw. It was human. Tears began to appear. At first, just a few. Then more. A woman in the front row wiped her eyes. A man beside her cleared his throat, trying to hide his emotions. Even the judges, who had seen countless performances, seemed visibly moved. Daniel didn't notice any of it. In that moment, he wasn't on a stage. He was back in his small room, singing by the window, pouring his heart into the night. Every note carried the pain of being doubted, the loneliness of feeling invisible, the love of a mother who never gave up on him, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, he could be more than what the world expected him to be. When the final note faded, the silence returned. But this time, it wasn't filled with doubt. It was filled with awe. And then, the audience erupted. The applause was thunderous, overwhelming. People stood to their feet, clapping, cheering, some still wiping tears from their eyes. Daniel opened his eyes, startled, as if waking from a dream. He looked out at the crowd, unable to fully process what was happening. The judges spoke one by one, their words filled with emotion. They praised not just his voice, but his courage, his authenticity, his ability to connect. One judge, visibly moved, said, "You didn't just sing a song. You made us feel something real. And that's what true artistry is." But the most powerful moment came when Daniel looked into the audience and saw his mother. She was standing, her hands clasped together, tears streaming down her face, her smile brighter than anything he had ever seen. In that moment, everything made sense. Every struggle, every doubt, every sleepless night, it had all led to this. Daniel didn't win the competition that night. But something far more important happened. He found his voice, not just as a singer, but as a person. In the weeks that followed, his performance spread across the internet, touching millions of hearts. Messages poured in from people who saw themselves in his story, who found comfort in his courage, who felt less alone because of his song. Back at school, things changed too. The same classmates who once mocked him now looked at him with respect. But Daniel didn't let it change who he was. He remained humble, kind, and focused on what truly mattered. He continued to sing, not for fame or recognition, but because it was who he was. And with each performance, he carried the same message that had brought him this far. That your voice matters, even if it shakes. That your dreams are valid, even if others doubt them. That courage doesn't mean being fearless, but choosing to move forward despite the fear. And most importantly, that sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is simply be honest, to share your story, your truth, your heart. Because somewhere out there, someone needs to hear it. And just like that night on stage, it might be the very thing that makes them believe again.